Right. We have been looking at, for the last few weeks, of course, last week we did not. It turned out perfect with us being gone and it being falling on the first week, and because afterwards I said, "Oh goodness, I got to find somebody for Wednesday." But Tommy and everything was so worked out. But we've been talking about the fisherman going from a fisherman to fisher of men, what Jesus did in the life of Simon Peter. And our last time together, when we were looking at we looked at Peter's walking on water. Then we went into even the last portion that we looked at was Peter's denial of Jesus. And as we imagine that last moment that we kind of closed with, I said, we got to wait a couple weeks before we get back together on this, but the last moment that Jesus looks at Peter in those moments of Peter has denied him, Peter has done what Jesus already said he would do. It's not something that was a secret or something that was not known to Jesus, but this moment has now been fulfilled. And to look, we said, at Jesus, to feel that agony of sorts that you would imagine that you've fallen short. You're the person who's always said, "I'll die with you. I'll go the extra mile. I'll go where nobody else will go. I'll do anything. I'll be there." And when it came to it, you weren't. And I know that many of us probably know that feeling from somebody probably in our life at some point, or maybe we've been that person who, as we said, didn't show up at a moment that we were needed. And we come into the passage tonight of John chapter 21, and I love the way that it's presented from John's Gospel, because you have the restoration of Peter here, and this whole story that unfolds, that Jesus, in verse 1 of John 21, Jesus reveals himself to the disciples on the Sea of Tiberias. And when he revealed himself in this way, Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." I said we began this whole entire thing with Peter fishing when Jesus called him, and now he says, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." And they went out and got into the boat. That night they caught nothing. Just as the day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" And they answered, "No." And he said to them, "Cast your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. And that disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, one of my favorite lines out to pull out of this, he goes, "It is the Lord." All of a sudden, we weren't catching anything all night, and we've said before, now it's daytime. It's not time for net fishing. And he tells me to cast the net on the right side of the boat. And as I cast the net on the right side of the boat, when I do this, I remember this scene unfolding before. Now I can't haul the fish in. They're so numerous. And John, a disciple whom Jesus loves, looks up. "Hey, that's the Lord." I just to think about that in that moment, and that his seeing and finally understanding, and Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord. He put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. The other disciples, what you see about them is they kept their mind about them. They actually pulled the fish in, and they tried to get the boat to shore. Instead, Peter just jumps overboard and starts swimming. Now, stop and think about this. the last look that he had from Jesus before this point was what? Right after he betrayed him. John says it is the Lord, and he comes into this moment, and this kind of despair is a lot of things that are working in him, and you imagine what he could be experiencing, but nonetheless, what you see is, he says, when they got on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish. For what reason? What? Yeah, we might eat. Now think about this. We're gathering together that we might just eat. And that bring the ones you've caught together, and just bring them that we can eat together. So Simon Peter went aboard, and he hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. Although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. And Jesus came, he took bread, he gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Now, you think about this. That's part that has always kind of stood out to me, the fact that this is the third time he's been revealed to them. But yet, there is a look as they're seeing him afar that they don't know it's the Lord. And they don't know in this moment. But Jesus shows up here for a purpose, and part of this purpose is the restoration. And we often focus so much on the restoration of Peter that we miss the restoration of everyone else that is happening in this moment. Because when Jesus came to the crucifixion, it wasn't just Peter that ran away. We noticed that Peter denied him, but it said that they would all scatter. Who was left, and who could have a little bit of bragging rights, if you will? It was John. John the Beloved, at the feet of Jesus, at the cross. It was John right there who Jesus says, "Son, behold your mother, mother, behold your son." That you see, John is there. All the others have scattered. So I don't think that Peter is alone in feeling like he has betrayed Jesus. Surely by this moment they know of Judas and what has happened and unfolded. But yet you have what Jesus does here. He shows up. In a moment, they've caught absolutely nothing. He tells them how to catch the fish. He tells them what to do in this appearance and where to let down the net. They failed. I love that very first moment that when Jesus shows up is they couldn't even do what they were good at. I mean, you're a fisherman and you can't even catch fish. You go back to the life, you're Rocky, and you can't even sell a car. I mean, some days. But you imagine this moment. He's sitting here, and they've failed. They're sitting on this boat, and this moment, morning has come, and they couldn't even catch anything. And Jesus comes up and he says, "Well, the net's on the wrong side. Put it on the right side and you catch some fish." They don't even know this guy. They do it, and when the fish start coming in, John's like, "That's the Lord." Because we've seen this unfold before, but this is such a great picture of grace and of mercy, because the fact is God didn't leave them in this moment as failures, unable to catch the simple thing that they needed to eat. When Jesus taught them to pray, what did he say? "Give us, Lord, our daily bread." Now, Jesus shows up here, and these boys couldn't even catch a fish. They didn't have the simple means for their day. And we see God provide even in their failures. God shows up even when they have fallen short. Jesus is restoring them. Jesus is pointing them back to the place of where they need to be in their life and showing them what restoration is all about. What we see when Jesus gets them to the shore, He's already got a fire lit. Bread. Bring the fish over. That might prepare them. Jesus not only shows them how to catch the fish, where to catch the fish, but then He prepares the meal for them in the moment of all the failures and everything that they have been through, all they have experienced. And you see how Jesus is kind of capturing back to moments that they've already had in their life. We said that the very first calling of them, when Jesus showed them how to catch the fish, now Jesus brings them to shore, and what are they eating? Bread and... Remember when these disciples said, "We don't have anything, Lord. There's just a boy here with some bread, some fish." And the Lord took it, and He what? He blessed it, and He fed. He fed this multitude, these individuals that were set before Him, 5,000 men, not including the women and children. When you see that Jesus has fed these, and when they were done, He told them to gather up what was left, and what was left? 12 baskets. Now Jesus gathers them together in this moment of restoration, and here He is. He has this fire lit, and He has bread prepared, and He takes the fish, and He prepares the meal for them as part of this restoration. What we see is there's not a scolding in this moment. They know they failed. When you've done wrong, I don't have to come beat you over the head with it. Most of the time we know when we've messed up. But you know what hurts more? When Jesus shows up and tells me how I'm still not able to do it in myself. I can't even catch a fish. I can't even fix my breakfast. He shows up and He does the simple things that I can't do. He restores. Do you know how humbling it is in that moment to see Jesus here doing this for them? And we go through as He feeds them, and He finishes their eating. The next is the dialogue between Jesus and Peter in verse 15. And this is where we said that we would get into the love and things. But it says, when they finished breakfast. You ever knew that a talk was getting ready to come? You were going to have a hard talk. And you sat down to a meal. Maybe somebody invited you over for dinner. But you knew you all had to have a hard talk. But first, let's have something to eat. Let's go have a slice of pie first. Let's meet for coffee. And when you're done, when you both kind of get quiet for a moment, everybody's kind of finished eating, you know that something's about to drop. They're about to say what you don't want to probably hear, but you know it's going to be said. You're about to have a hard conversation. They finish eating breakfast. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Jesus doesn't beat around the bush with it or anything. He cuts right to it, which is the most interesting way to put it. That He comes into this and he says to him, do you love me more than these others do? And He uses his full name and his title and everything about Him. And what you see is by calling Him out like this. I know when my daughters, they're Addie and they're Bella. But when I need to call them out, you say, what? Adeline Grace, Arabella Catherine. called them out by name. Jesus calls Peter out by name in this moment. He calls him out and he says, Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. So now, here is the interesting part of the love, that what we see, that the two love forms that are taking place here, that we've all heard of, said in church over time, of agape love, and this phileo love, this love that is kind of like a brotherly love that we get the Philadelphia from, and these, but agape love, what I love about it is it's an unconditional love, but it is a love that is a covenant love, the choice love that says that I love you no matter what. It's a love that's not based on a feeling. It's not based on what comes or goes or the ups and downs of life. So many things. I mean, we say love for a lot of things today. I actually said this here a couple weeks ago in a video. We say, I love my food. I love this destination or whatever place we're going to. I love my car. I love my this or that. And then you'll say, I love my wife. I love my kids. And hopefully we love them out of a different way than each other. Hopefully we don't love our meal that we get from the Mexican restaurant in the same way that we love our spouse. Now, even though we don't have a different word that we use for love, we say it in our minds. We ourselves, and I think everyone around us knows, we don't love that meal that we get prepared for us over here the same way that we love our spouse or children. We do apply a different definition to love. We'll say we love people in our church or our neighbors that we come in contact. But at the end of the day, we have a deeper love and affection for those within the four walls of our house. We have a brotherly love for a lot of people. So the agape love that Jesus speaks of here, and that's what he says to Peter, is he says, do you love me? And the word that Jesus uses is agape. He says, do you love me with this total and utter commitment? Now, Peter answers back to Jesus, and he says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He wants him, he says that you know that I love you. But the word that Peter uses, the word love there, is the brotherly love definition of love. He doesn't answer back in this unconditional, and Peter doesn't feel like he loves him to the extent that he should, but he says, I love you like I love a brother. And for Jesus, that's okay. Jesus looks at him and says, what? Feed my lambs. He says to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Same questions, same utterances, same word reflection. He uses the agape form, and Peter answers back again the same way. He says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. I love you like a brother. I love you in that sense. Now, we go through this, and Jesus has a way of getting us down to the truth. How many times in church do we say things that we know it's the right thing to say, but at our heart, it's maybe not the truth? We say, I love God. We know we ought to love God, but how deeply and how wholly do we love God? And it's a hard question because we don't know love without who? We love because He, first loved us. We experience and know love because of Him. Now, Jesus, in the third question, what Jesus calls out to him is what? He gets him back after the first and the second, because the second time He tells him he knows he says, tend my sheep. And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, now, do you love me? Now, the third time, the reason Peter's grieved is not because of what most people would identify with, but the third time Jesus doesn't use the word agape. The third time Jesus changes the inflection here to brotherly love, and he says, but Peter, do you love me like a brother? Now think about how this would grieve. Remember where we left Peter a couple weeks ago. Peter's denied him. Peter has betrayed in his mind Jesus. Now Jesus just basically turns Peter's own words on himself and he says, Peter, do you love me like a brother? I want to know, do you love me like a brother? Now, you want to talk about hitting at the heart and hitting at the core. This language, this way in which Peter is asked this question, because he says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Just imagine him coming at him. Lord, you know that I love you. But in himself, I can imagine Peter knew that he hadn't lived up to his own standards. Jesus' way of saying, here's the thing. You say you love me like a brother. You were the one who was all talk, Peter. All of Jesus' ministry, Peter was the first one out the gate to say what? I'll do it. I'll go. I'll be there. I'll go with you even to the death. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind. Peter is the one who is there, and he's the first one outspoken to say it. He's the first one to say that it doesn't matter what it is. I will be loyal to you no matter what. But here's the problem. Peter hasn't lived up to his own words. He's made a lot of promises. He's said a lot of great things. Done a lot of great ministry work. But when it truly came to a time that it was tough, we see that Peter's not there. Now, why is this? Now, Jesus, in the last one, he just says, it's okay. Feed my sheep. What we look at is Jesus' words in him is, Peter knew he's fallen. He knows he's failed. He's known everything. But the fact is, Peter's looking at him when his answer, he says, Lord, you know everything. Peter wants to love Jesus. He wants to follow. He wants to do what's right. But the problem is he hasn't been able to do it. We said that he was a disciple who had his frailty, but he would become a faithful disciple. His intentions were good. But in the end, he fell short. But the reality is, Jesus' part in this restoration is he's teaching Peter something throughout the whole thing. When he went to the shore, he shows up and he shows him, Peter, you can't catch fish without me. Jesus prepares their breakfast. He feeds them because at this point he's showing them compassion and love and the restoration. What Jesus is doing is bringing them closer in to show them that all that they do is going to be through him and his ability of what he's showing them, how to have compassion, how to have care. And here's one thing that's difficult. Think about this. Peter failed. Jesus shows forgiveness. Jesus didn't bawl Peter out there on the side of the sea and tell him, what a failure, what a terrible friend you are, how can you call yourself my student and then do what you did? Jesus utterly forgives him. You know what that love is? That's an unconditional love that loves beyond what anybody does. You see, the kind of love that God calls us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. The two commandments that Jesus gave when He said, these are greater than all. And He says, it's all the law and the prophets hang on these two, to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. That this forgiveness that Jesus shows here is taking Peter to a point that says, guess what? Somebody's going to do the same to you in your life. Jesus does something that most would never do. He shows up with food there prepared. He shows up to show them compassion. He shows them tolerance. He shows them patience. He shows them hospitality. And He shows us, after all the things that we can do wrong, to deny Him, our thoughts, our words, our actions, even cowardice. Peter tells him here, what we see is, between their dialogue back and forth, Jesus told him that last time to feed my sheep, and He says, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself. You walked wherever you wanted. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another will dress you, carry you, and where you do not want to go. And this He said to show by what kind of death He was going to glorify God. And after saying this, He said to him, what? Follow me. Follow me. Now, we encounter all of this, and I know the whole story brings out a lot of what happens, but Jesus is restoring His disciples, each and every one of them, in this moment. Of course, the next portion goes into John's kind of, I've always loved the way that John the eavesdropper, it would have been what it said, but you've got Peter turns and he saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them. One who also leaned back against Him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that's going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said, Jesus, well, Lord, what about this man? Now, let me stop right there for a moment. And I want you to go through the whole order of everything that has unfolded. Jesus is here talking with Peter. And He's telling Peter how to follow Him. He's telling him what to do and to feed His sheep. And Peter looks back and he sees John, and his question is, well, what about him? What's going to happen to him? First of all, why is the focus on John? Why, in a moment that you know none of this is about John, do you care what's going to happen to John?
Lamar used to say, if you want to look tall, stand beside a short person.
Yeah.
If you want to look thin, stand beside a fat person.
Yeah,
We have this tendency to compare ourselves
we do.
with others.
Mm-hmm.
And at least I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good because I may have done wrong, but I didn't do that. I don't know if Peter was wanting to compare with John.
You know, there's got to be, and I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for Peter, I'll just speak for me. If I was in Peter's shoes, and I look back and I see John, and I know what John has done, the comparison aspect is, Jesus has just told me something I don't want to hear. He has told me, yes, I get to serve Him. Yes, Jesus has showed up. Yes, Jesus is here. And by all means, I'm glad He loves me, and I'm glad that I'm blessed in this aspect. But I'll tell you, the thing that I just don't like is, you've just told me that I'm going to lose my freedom. You've told me everything's going to be stripped away from me. You've told me what my life is going to become. I'm going to be led around in places I don't want to go. You told me everything that I don't want to hear. I look back and see John. Yeah. That's you see him, and you feel inferior. Now, you'll never admit that you feel inferior. I don't think there's any number of us that's going to look at somebody else and say, you make me feel small. I wish I was as good as what you were. I wish that Jesus said that I was the disciple whom He loved. Maybe John just chose that because he wrote the book. That's the old joke, is if you wrote the book, you can call yourself whatever you want. No, that isn't the path in which it went. What we see is he looks back, and and from my aspect, I would say I would feel inferior. And I want to know, is he going to have it as bad as I'm going to have it? At least tell me he's going to get it as bad as me. Or are you punishing me because I betrayed you? Are you just doing this to me because of what I did? Is John going to have a better life than me because John's been better than me, and John's been good, and John's done all these things, and John takes care of your mother, and John's going to get better set up than me? Are you going to hold these things against me, Jesus? The reality is, He never holds our past against us of any of the things that you've done. It isn't that He ever looks at you. You see, the brotherly love, that's what, sometimes in brotherly love, that's what we do. We look at somebody else's actions, and somebody else's actions are constantly being weighed on us of how we feel about somebody on a day-to-day basis. But agape, what He's doing is, it doesn't matter what they've done. Jesus' answer says, if it's my will that He remains until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. I always like the fact that the rumor starts spreading around, well, John's going to tarry till Jesus comes back. That's what's going to happen. That's what Jesus said. That wasn't what Jesus said. Jesus said, it's none of your business what happens to John. Churches have so much discord, and the unity is broken in churches many times in many fellowships because we get our eyes focused on what the other person is doing rather than our eyes focused on the Lord of the work. Jesus says, it doesn't matter what I do in His life. It doesn't matter how much I bless Him, how much I give to Him. If I so choose and keep Him here until the day I come, but yet you're going to live in misery and be hauled around and have all your freedom taken away, what does that matter to you? Follow me. Because I'm not John. Many times we look back to Scripture, we say, well, I'll be like Peter. My life is not them. God has a life in which He has molded and crafted for each and every one of us. He knows our path. So we first He looks back at him and says, what? He looks and wants to know what's going to happen to this man. Now, what do you do when faced with a hard truth? What do you do when you are faced with the reality of you've fallen short? You already knew it. Nobody had to tell you, but Jesus just kind of reminded you. What is your choice in that moment? Everybody always wants to talk about free will and choice. Well, what is your choice in that moment? What do you choose to do with it? You now have heard the truth of where you are. And here's the thing, you can't fix it. That's the part I love about it the most is, Peter, all your life, you know what you've done? You've relied on yourself. Christianity has got to get to a basis where we stop relying on ourselves. You know what? We can fake it so far that we can make ourselves look good through appearances, and we can fake Christianity so much through the right words. That's what I said a while ago. How many times have we said the right thing because we knew it was the right thing to say, but inwardly we knew that it wasn't our heart? Peter said the right things all along. I used to have a guy, big deacon, that stand back here, and he'd say, fake it till you make it. But throw a smile on your face and fake it till you make it. Now, I knew his heart, and I knew what he meant. But I think sometimes that's the reality of a lot of Christians and a lot of churches. We fake it, hoping we're going to make it. We fake it, hoping that our relationship and hoping that we have this walk that isn't quite where it needs to be because we don't face the hard truths. Now, I'm not saying that Peter didn't have a walk with Jesus before. He did.
In some ways, he did do what he said he would do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when he cut off the ear
Yes.
of a man, he wasn't saying, let me cut off his ear.
Yeah.
The guy died. I mean, he was trying to take his head off.
Yeah.
I mean,
And he defended.
Said, I'll die with you. At that very moment, that's what he thought was going to be required.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't do that.
And taking off Malchus's ear, the thing about that is, right after that betrayal happens and the denial, what we see is Jesus puts the ear back on. Now, I would defend you. I would go this far. I would do all these things for you, Lord. And we kind of skipped over that portion to get to here. But I mean, I thought I was doing, and that's part of Peter's self-reliance and doing what he thinks he knows is best. I was rising up and defending Jesus. Jesus didn't ask you to rise up and defend him.
We know this, and we know it's true in our own lives. Peter's a flawed individual.
Yeah.
And so are we. I always think of this, Jesus' 7 I am statements. One of them is, I am the good shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
And over and over and over in Scripture, people are likened to sheep.
Yeah.
And sheep are prone to wander.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bad news. The good news is the shepherd, it may be the nature of sheep to wander, but the nature of the shepherd is to restore.
Yeah.
And David says in the 23rd Psalm, he restored my soul.
Yeah.
And I think that's a picture of what Jesus is doing here with Peter.
Yeah.
He's going to restore Peter. This is a commission.
Yes.
Be my sheep.
Mm-hmm.
In my sheep.
He hasn't punished him or taken anything from him. And sometimes, I will say this, some people need spoken to a certain way as opposed to how someone else may need spoken to. And God knows how to get a hold of each and every one of our attention. The way in which Jesus speaks to Peter, he knows what to speak into his life and the truth in which and how to speak it into his life to capture his attention, to grab at his heart, and to make him realize the truth that he needs to realize. That's what I love about the gospel is the gospel does what I am unable to do with my words. It takes God's word and pierces the heart and communicates it in such a way that only His word can do. It takes it to that individual who may be struggling with something individual that we never even talked about. And yet God has the ability to take that and apply it directly and wholly to their life in that moment. They may be grieving. They may be suffering with something that we have no idea. And say, how did you know? Same way Jesus spoke to the woman at the well, and she told everyone, come meet a man that told me all I ever did. I didn't know a thing, but he did. His word has the way in which it permeates and it reaches the heart. And that's where this passage, what Jesus does when he reaches them, it wasn't just Peter he was restoring. All the disciples were seeing. All the disciples needed to feel like they were reconciled to Jesus. I asked you what the choice is when you're faced with a hard truth. You can do one of two things. Growing up, they used to always say, I know this phrase is probably familiar with all of us, is like it or lump it. They used to, but here's the thing is, truth is truth. Now, you can not like truth, and you can get mad at truth, and you can bull up and say, I reject truth, and you can walk away from truth, or you can say, well, truth hurts my feelings, offends me, or makes me feel bad. And you can do all of these things and walk away from truth in those moments. But the reality is, truth is truth. And Jesus presenting truth into Peter's life and to reconcile him, to bring him back into the place, he's presented with this question, his commission. And he said, follow me. Now, I may not like everything I just had to hear, but I like who it's coming from. And I know that the one who is calling me cares about me unlike anyone else. Here's the thing, it may not always be an easy path with him, but the fact is, no one cares for us like he does, because no one ever went to the lengths for you that he did. Your spouse, your children, your parents, no one in your life cares for you the way that he does. So when he looks at Peter, there's no one in Peter's life that cares for him the way that he does. When he says, follow me, he says, I'm going to be honest with you. Tells him how hard it's going to be. Faces him with it. But then he says, follow me. Now, guess what? This life isn't always easy. No one ever promised it was. But follow me. Feed my sheep. Disciple others. Because what is the reward? What is the benefit? The gospel bringing people to him. Heaven is at stake for a lot of people who've never yet accepted the gospel. For us, growing in our faith, following him more, there's a lot of things that we see that are at stake. Now, I'll ask this. Did I miss anything before? I love where this goes from here. And Jeff didn't even mention it tonight. I don't know how many lessons y'all do a week in Sunday school, but it seems to be an awful lot. Every time I go to say something, and we just had this in Sunday, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Sunday school class. I'm going to have to stop into that class.
The thing about it is, it wasn't that finally Peter got it right.
No.
What happened was, we're going right here Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Last Sunday we were at Pentecost. And we talked about, here was Peter.
Yeah.
Standing up, preaching this powerful sermon because he got it right. Was the Holy Spirit. Peter, who was once, yes, in denial,
Mm-hmm.
was now standing before a crowd and saying, you crucified him.
Yeah.
But it was part of God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, this is what Joel talked fulfillment of the promise. And now, you have to do something with it.
You have to choose what to do. And that's where it'll get into all of this. And Peter, that is the transition that I'm waiting and excited for, because here's the thing about it. What we see at that point is none of it is Peter. Right here, all we see and all we've looked at and all we've considered is, gee, old Peter, he just keeps on failing. Peter, he does a good thing and then he does a bad thing. He just goes 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. But the reality is, he was following Jesus, he was walking with Jesus and all these things. In our life, we do the same thing, because we'll go forward in our faith and we'll be heading, and then we have this strong urge to rely on ourselves in moments. And boy, we'll just take a plunge into a direction that we should not take. But He's always faithful. And He's always there. And He leads us where we need to go. What we see as Peter's transition is stop relying on self. And it's Him. He takes those words that Jesus says to heart. Who cares about what happens to John? Follow me. Boy, if we could grasp that one thing as a church, as any churches today, any Christians, what would it do? Forget about everything else. Just follow me. Any other thoughts tonight? Comments? Complaints? I'll open up for that. No.